So Gino Watkins, as we know him now, probably is best known as a kayaker. Gino Watkins is sometimes given the moniker of the father of modern sea kayaking, but he was a young Cambridge University graduate who undertook a series of expeditions and most notably led an expedition called the British Arctic Air Route Expedition to East Greenland. The risks were multifold, from cold that can be down to 60, 70 below, gale force winds blowing up there. Kayaking in ice-choked waters, the chances are that you don't survive, as ultimately happened to Gino himself. I'm Dave, and I have a bunch of dogs, a whole bunch of dogs. I think I've got about 45 dogs right now. We're right in Swedish Lapland, right up close to the Arctic Circle. I think this year is about the 12th year that my partner Annette and I have lived here. She's a veterinarian, but she's also a specialist veterinarian in sled dogs. We met many years ago in the Yukon when I was taking part in a dog sled race there. I've been with sled dogs in one way or another for now over 40 years. You know, when I developed an interest in the wilderness, and particularly cold places, they were sort of synonymous with all the stories I'd read about explorers and Inuit hunters. It was almost inevitable that I'd end up with a connection to sled dogs. So Gino Watkins, as we know him now, probably is best known as a kayaker. Gino Watkins is sometimes given the moniker of the father of modern sea kayaking. But he was a young Cambridge University graduate who undertook a series of expeditions and most notably led an expedition called the British Arctic Air Route Expedition to East Greenland, which was to survey a route for a proposed transatlantic aviation route that would connect North America to Europe. They were polar explorers, but they were also mariners, they were kayakers, they were hunters, they became meteorologists, they were pilots. I think the common denominator was just they all had a passion for adventure and for exploration and for reaching out and finding their boundaries. The project, the White Kayak, is to return to this wonderful environment that is East Greenland, tell the story of Gino Watkins, tell the story of the expeditions that they did, a whole array of expeditions within the main expedition across the Greenland Icecap with a team of dogs, kayak journeys, aviation journeys, and by default tell the story of how much that environment has changed with glaciers melting, fjords that no longer freeze, changes in the culture there, and how the changes in the environment has affected them. one of the most inspirational parts of their approach to their expeditions was Gino and his compatriots' ability and willingness to embrace and to learn from the indigenous people that lived there, from the Inuit people. Gino recognized very early on that if they were to efficiently function in a place like East Greenland, the experts were the people who lived there. Very quickly, Gino and many of the others learnt how to kayak. You know, to learn to roll a kayak is one thing in a swimming pool today. To learn to do that in a skin-framed boat in East Greenland to a level that they could actually go out and hunt seals. You know, that took a huge amount of resolution and adaptation and commitment. Watkins' last expedition is a relatively short, rather sad but also inspiring book. It talks of Gino and 3 of his companions. They installed themselves with a group of sled dogs in their hut and were preparing for the winter. The risks were multifold. They stepped into potentially a highly volatile and potentially dangerous environment. Their forays up onto the ice cap were fraught with potential dangers from cold that can be down to 60, 70 below, gale force winds blowing up there, kayaking in ice-choked waters, polar bears, crevasses. They were on their own. So, you know, there were risks stacked one on top of the other. And Gino was out hunting for seals. They needed to put in quite a stock of seal meat for themselves and for their dogs. And Gino was confident that he could bring in enough seal meat to meet those demands. Despite the fact that many of his Inuit friends had said never paddle alone, Gino had utmost confidence in his own abilities, and so did paddle alone, did hunt alone. And unfortunately, he paid the ultimate price in that we assume drowned in the fjord whilst out with his kayak seal hunting. His 3 companions, they were absolutely crushed by the loss of Gino. It's a difficult thing to describe, but to go from a position where you're with your friends, you're very close, everything is symbiotic, and then you have a member of that group just is gone. I've had a friend disappear into a crevasse, another into an avalanche. It took quite a shock to the system to reconcile to that, but at the same time, nothing else changes. You're still in the same environment, still the same wind, still the same risk, still the same danger. And so you either quit or you quickly recalibrate yourself, and everybody else does the same, and to continue. And that's exactly what these guys did. And I find that an example of the kind of people that these guys were. People that have not perhaps faced those events have a hard time to understand. There's almost a perception of it being a little bit callous. And in fact, it's completely the opposite. It almost becomes a duty to try to be successful and try to be the best that we can, to at least give a little bit back to that person that's paid the ultimate price in pursuing the same goal. It forces people into evaluating values in a different way, and it illuminates the value of life and the value of living. You know, that's a personal choice that we all have to decide which particular path you're going to pursue. You can choose whether you take some strength from that in where you go from there on or not. Perhaps the main thing that always strikes me is there are very few activities that a human can do that can be truly symbiotic with another species. And to get out in really, wild places with a group of dogs, you become so codependent that that's very, very unique. I want to understand dogs, not just what they can do physically, but what motivates them to be a pack, what motivates them to be individuals, how those dynamics change through their lifetimes. So I've tried to adopt a little bit more of a flexible approach to the dogs and the way that they behave. I like to let them be part of a pack. Dogs need to be dogs. I'm not about controlling dogs. I want to work with them. I need to be the responsible adult in the group sometimes. I want them to feel that they can explore and that they can find their boundaries and they can develop their relationships with their peers. One questions all the time the ethical balances of what we do with sled dogs. That should be, with any human-animal relationship. I think it's very easy for a lot of human beings to overlook their ethical responsibilities when it comes to the way that they interact with their pets and their animals. They're not tools. They're not to just simply be disposed of when a tool becomes blunt. They deserve to have a safe, warm place when they get old and they get infirm, and they deserve to be cared for and treated properly in their old age as much as they're sort of revered when they're, the young athletic dogs that we all love to have on our line when we're flying down the trail. The old dogs give just as much as the young ones do. So, they should pass away as dignified old dogs, and they deserve that, and they sure work for it. There are a lot of dogs living on a lot of chewed sofas in my house. A successful outcome to our project, White Kayak, would be to create a more illuminated story of Gino Watkins and his team members. I think it's a story that can inspire people at a time when a lot of modern exploration is losing its allure. A lot of it has become too high-tech. And I want to tell a story that's a bit more down to earth, that comes from the heart a bit more, and that shines light on the commitment that these people had, their willingness to embrace their surroundings and the people around them, and show you who these people were and what they did. That there's a next generation of explorers out there that look upon their world with a similar way that Gino Watkins and his team did. Be an explorer, be an adventurer. It's still a big, beautiful world out there. It deserves our utmost attention, our utmost care. And I hope there's a little bit about what we're doing that helps underline that and reminds us, what a cool planet is that we all live on. So we'll see you all out there, and we want to be part of our grand endeavour to tell the stories of some very inspirational people. Maybe you just like fluffy huskies. We'll have that in there too.